So it's a whole different world of what these guys get to do, have to deal with. And so I understand it on some levels. But there are definitely still the prima donnas who get to be their prima donna ways out there in different ways through social media or not, on the court or not. So it's just all around a different world than what I grew up with, what athletes had to deal with, whether they wanted to or not back in the day. Like now it's just everywhere.
Which that's actually a very apt point, obviously. Like, how would a Dennis Rodman, for example, how would he act? Or even Dr. J is another example. Like Dr. J would probably be much more akin to players there are now if he had the ability to do so. I get that point. I guess that aspect of it, I understand that point of it. It's a different culture. The issue that I much more point to, and it's something that even like lifer NBA people like Stephen A are starting to get annoyed with, is when it's now affecting the on the court, I almost said on the field, on the court brand, because you have it where Ben Simmons has arguably one of the worst playoff series anyone's ever seen out of a star, and then he just quits afterwards. Unspeakable that something like that would happen. Just, it's crazy to just think about that abstractly. But then you have all these other players who are sitting out. And who I think is like the greatest indictment of this kind of NBA hype up your stars thing is James Harden. I think James Harden is maybe the most destructive professional player of any sport ever. He ruined how the game of basketball was played. And I think that if I were the NBA, I would ostracize him as the evil that he is to my game. And it's just that. And so that's where I come from with that, where this sort of prima donna thing, this brand, all this kind of stuff, it is poisoning the actual product that you're seeing play out. At least in the NFL, that's not going to, like, wide receivers now have so much more autonomy about where they can go. That's not changing how football is being played on the field. It's not changing. But with the NBA, there is a direct line between players getting more power, having brands, and not having basketball be life anymore, and the quality of what basketball is now.
Yeah, look, and there's always guys that are outside the realm of what we're talking about, no matter what era. There are great stars in today's era that give their heart and play as much as they
Giannis
can.
Is one of them.
Giannis, absolutely one of them. Steph Curry, absolutely one of them. You have your stars that are going to be out there night in and night out as long as they are healthy, and they're not taking nights off, really. We can't blanket statement an entire league.
Fair enough.
But I understand what you're saying. When there are enough stars that are pulling this stuff and showing themselves to be a certain way that is not helpful to the game of basketball, you have a point. And there are enough stars throughout this last decade, let's go over the last 10 years, 12 to now, have shown that where being at a strip club was more important than whether or not you won or lost a basketball game.
Shout out Lou Williams.
So you're always going to get that no matter what the era is. I just think, I'm not saying you're wrong. It's because look, there's a lot of things in the game of basketball that I cannot stand. I hate they don't call it traveling. It drives me nuts. The idea of a travel has changed so much. The idea of a dribble has changed so much. If you go look at old basketball, they're doing this to dribble the ball, because if you did anything like that, you are now carrying. That little bit becomes a carry. And now, obviously, in today's day and age where it's so flashy and everyone's going back and forth, and you have to get your hand around it and down to do some of the things you're doing with the dribble, they don't call carry for a lot of the stuff anymore like they should have or would have back in the day. Traveling is absolutely ridiculous. They're showing highlights of guys that do stuff that shouldn't be a highlight because it's completely illegal. And back in the day, it wasn't a highlight because the whistle was blown, and that's a travel. So it's a completely different game. They're trying to take advantage of the rules in different ways, and that's what Harden did. As much as I hate it and you hate it and hate him, and look, he went to ASU. That's enough for me already to not like the man. But I also just don't think – I think he was an absolutely overblown good shooting guard. That's it. Man made his living at the free throw line, taking 15 a night, and that's why his points per game are so high. Look, did he get high triple-double numbers? Absolutely. I can't take away his passing ability. I hate the fact he doesn't play defense. I hate the fact for anyone in the NBA that doesn't play defense. My favorite players, my stars, played both sides of the ball. And so that's just who I am. Growing up in Detroit, where you have the bad boys and they go to work, defense is built into your DNA. So that part of it, I've never liked him for that reason alone, that he doesn't even try to play defense. But he took advantage of the rules of the NBA. The whistles were blown. He got to shoot these free throws, and we hate him even more for it because he's higher and higher on the point totals and the assist totals and all the other crap. When the game's on the line and it matters, though, guess what? You don't find James Harden anywhere because that man shriveled. You might as well have had Ben Simmons this year for the 76ers in the playoffs. That's how much James Harden did offensively for them. So
that's right.
But the game has changed. Society has changed around it. You are always going to have your divas. You're always going to have your hard workers and who should be considered the role models for this day and age. But there's so much that we can see now. It just makes it more obvious when the guys are out there who are doing things they shouldn't be doing and hurting the product on the court that it's hard to turn a blind eye to.
Man on a mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on a what? Yeah.